Hey guys, what's going on? It's Buns. Welcome to the Legion class overview for Mage. Now today I'd spent about 5 hours on stream going on and playing around in my Mage, testing out all 3 different specs and battlegrounds today. And I have to say, I actually had a really good time playing a lot of the different specs. And we'll get into that today. So the first spec that we're covering is Arcane, then Fire, then Frost. Going through all 3, and I'll give you guys a little bit of feedback, give you guys my update on how I enjoyed playing the 3 different specs and what you can kind of expect from them. So, starting out with Arcane Mage. Arcane it's in a very odd spot right now. I would say that the part that I enjoyed the most out of everything is that Arcane had really high mobility. Like crazy. And I want to show you guys here. So, for those of you that don't really know what's going on with Arcane Mage, you get 4 blinks, technically. So you get an ability called Shimmer, which basically takes your blink if you talent into it, which I would highly recommend because later on in your honor talent trees, you get an ability called Prismatic Cloak, which after you blink, gives you a 1.5-second window after you blink to and give you immunity to all spell effects going on you. And it's great because with Shimmer you get 2 charges of it, so you have a huge amount of creativity that the class allows within itself to outplay people or give you some breaks when you might be taking a little bit of excess of damage. Now, on top of that cool mechanic, I'll just show you how much distance you can actually cover with these 2 blinks. So, with Shimmer, you get 2 charges of blink. You can go really far, really surprisingly. So there's your first blink. That's where I was before, and second blink. But then on top of that, you have an ability called Displacement. Now check this out real quick. Whoop! Whoop! Whoa! And you just are already back to where you were before. So I'll break that down. I just had to get you with a surprise there. So basically what Displacement does, Displacement is a really cool ability that they added into the Arcane build to give it a very high mobility where it teleports you back from where you last blinked from. So I'll show you guys in a second here. So when I blinked the first time, I blinked again and then I used Displacement. So it took me back to where I had blinked after the first one. But also part of Displacement is when you use Displacement, you actually get another charge of blink. So in reality, it's almost as if you get 4 blinks, right? So I'll show you guys again. Here we go. So now that you know what's going on, you kind of get the idea. You blink, blink, Displacement, you're back to where you were, and then you can blink again. So your mobility is crazy on Mage. It's a lot of fun, and then partnered with that Shimmer talent that I was talking about earlier, the immunity for a 1.5 seconds, you can have a lot of fun with that, and a lot of outplay if you're going against other casters or other people like that too. So I had a lot of fun with the mobility. Now the things that were a bit annoying for me today on Arcane Mage, I will say this. The damage for Arcane Mage is quite low. And not only is it quite low, it has some ramp up. So unless you're playing with some of the cooldowns like Arcane Orb, which you can use, and if there's a bunch of targets in your way, you can get 4 charges very quickly. Or another talent that you can spec into called Charged Up, which gives you 4 arcane charges. There's a lot of ramp up that you have to do, and it's hard to sustain your mana when you are at 4 charges. And the damage you were doing is not that high either. So just to give you guys an idea, your main spam is Arcane Blast, and then Arcane Blast has a chance to proc Arcane Missiles along with all of your other arcane attacks. But once you get to this once you get to this 4 stack of damage, you can see how much of a chunk it's having on my mana pool. Look at that. It's costing about 25k mana every single 4 stack blast, which is your consistent damage and how you need to do damage. And I'm already sitting here. So mana was a problem, and the amount of damage that I was doing, considering how much mana I was taking, was not that high. So from a damage standpoint, it was low to mid tier, but it was consistent. I think for Arcane to be something a little bit more appealing for myself personally, I would need to see the damage be higher considering how spiky the mana pool is and how non-consistent the damage is when you have 4 stacks. So for me personally, I enjoyed the high mobility of it, but the damage seems like it needs to be buffed a little bit for something that I personally would want to do in PvP. But to give you a little outtake, you have Arcane Blast, you have Arcane Missiles that proc off of all of your Arcane moves, and Arcane Missile seems to be your highest damaging ability when you actually have 4 stacks, and it doesn't really cost mana either, too, so it's a very nice ability to use when you are low on mana. But it's very much, as I've said now repeatedly, it's very much revolved around, do you have enough mana to make it sustainable, and then the damage when you get having 4 stacks isn't even that high. So for me, I like the mobility, that was the funnest part. I didn't really like the damage. I went out of it very quickly. Then For your fire spec, this is the spec that I probably enjoyed the most, and I would say is going to be the best spec in PvP, whether you're going to play battlegrounds or arenas. And honestly, it may end up even being the best in PvE as well too. Not that I'm that kind of a person, but fire is really strong right now. And the reason why fire is super good is the amount of damage that they have available through instant cast. So just like before, you have Hot Streak, which is one of the big things that fire is built around. It's a passive, so I'll read it to you guys. Hot Streak is getting 2 direct damage critical strikes in a row. Will make your next Pyroblast or Flame Strike spell instant cast and double the normal ignite damage. So obviously you guys can read too, but I think it's helpful to say out loud as well too, just to get in your head. So keeping that in mind, you want to be able to find a way to get multiple crits in a row to get these instant cast Pyroblast or Flame Strikes if you would like to do AoE pressure to get the more damage out of it. So fire has a lot of spells for you to be able to do that. Now, some changes here that people coming back from previous expansions are going to have to get used to, but are cool changes. Fire Blast, which was kind of your filler spell when you needed a global maybe to get that crit off or have something where you're not casting and maybe as a finisher. Now, Fire Blast always is a critical strike damage, but on top of that, it's also off of the global, which is crazy. So let me give you guys an example here. So I'm going to cast my Fireball, all right? And let's say I get a crit here. Nice, so I got a crit. So I get my, and then in the middle of my cast right there, you see I use my Fire Blast. So I'll show you guys again. Let me use that proc right there, just to give you guys an example. So let's get a crit with a Fireball here. Nice, and I'm going to use my Fire Blast in the middle of my second cast, and we got a proc right there, which is our Hot Streak, Flame Strike, or Pyroblast. Which is doing significant damage. So you can be on the move using Scorch if you need to, even though I would say from what I've seen and from my experience is that actually you're not using Scorch that much. It's really not doing that much damage. Fireballs are very consistent damage, so you're going to want to be using Fireball and throwing in those Fire Blasts in between. Help line up those crits, and then let's get ourselves in a position where we can get another crit as well too. So we got a crit here. At this point, you have Combustion, which makes all of your spells for the next 10 seconds 100% chance to crit. So at this point, you want to pop Combustion. When you have the Hot Streak proc up, Fireball into a Pyroblast, and then you can really see how it snowballs out of control here when I have 100% crit. That was insane. Flame on, dog. Like, we're going Fantastic Four in a bitch. We're lighting shit up. Fire is a lot of fun. A lot of different ways to chain your crits instantaneously. And as well, too, if you get locked on damage, you can cast in other trees. Whereas in Arcane, if you get locked Arcane, you're pretty screwed outside of Ice Block. You're in a pretty bad position. You can't damage. Now, as Fire, the one last thing I'm going to say that's great about Fire, too, that's really not offered in the other specs right now, is Dragon's Breath. And Dragon's Breath is the AoE disorient to get everyone in a cone-shaped area in front of you. Looks like this, but it doesn't actually disorient the targets in front of me. So you can see the disorient effect on them, but it's not actually going to do anything because it's a training dummy, etc. So the disorient is a great way to set up your CC. So you can blink in, use Dragon's Breath on the healer or a DPS that you want to sheep, and initiate that as setup. Similar to how you used, oh my goodness, slipping my mind, Frost, Deep Freeze. Wow, the translation, we just had to get the tongue moving to really work it out there. It's very similar to how Deep Freeze worked for Frost last expansion, where you could deep your focus target healer or focus DPS and then put a sheep on them and get the free cast. Dragon's Breath works very similarly. You just have to position the targets to stack up or account for where other people are on the map and then blink in, Dragon's Breath the person you want and get a free sheep off. So very, very effective way for getting CC off and getting your sheeps off without getting interrupted. So that's basically the overview of Fire. A lot of fun. On the move, probably the spec that I will be playing personally. And then finally you have Frost. And Frost is way different than it was before. Now, for those of you guys that have been following PvP on beta and been watching a lot of YouTube videos and streams, you guys have probably seen some of the insane numbers that you can do with Glacial Spike. Well, this past week, they tuned down the Glacial Spike damage by a lot. And basically what they did is they didn't actually tune down the Glacial Spike damage to the spell itself that much, but they made the Icicle damage not generate as much for the Glacial Spike, and it was toned down. So in total, it didn't really affect the Glacial Spike damage. It just, the icicles that were charging up Glacial Spike are no longer doing as much, so you didn't get as much benefit from them. That probably didn't make as much sense because I didn't actually explain what Glacial Spike is to some of you that don't know what it is. But Glacial Spike is basically your big damaging ability, and what Frost is all about right now is ramping up Frost Bolts, getting 5 icicles, unleashing a Glacial Spike on someone, and then ramping up your Frost Bolts again while freezing and novaing the targets, getting them in shatters to get big icicle numbers up, and then release all of those icicles in your Glacial Spike to go in and do huge damage. And early on in the beta, it was doing 3 million damage, which people's health pools are like 2.2 million. It was legitimately one-shotting people, but there was a lot of setup to it. Now, unfortunately, Frost is in a really bad spot now because they heavily nerfed Glacial Spike, which, to be fair, I mean, that was needed. You were over than one-shotting people. It was definitely needed, but they overtuned it a lot, and what ended up happening because of that is it was really the only thing going for Frost Mage. Now, let me explain kind of how the Glacial Spike build works. Now, the first row of talents that you go into, there's a talent called Lonely Winter, and you can no longer summon your Water Elemental, but your Frostbolt, Ice Lance, Flurry, and Frozen Orb deal 20% more damage. But you don't have your Frost Elemental, which is super weird to a lot of people playing Frost, including myself, that like having the extra CC. That's not available, but unfortunately, the only route really that Frost had to offer is this one-shot damage. The problem with Frost is right now is that since they've nerfed back the damage on Glacial Spike, the consistent damage it offers between Frostbolt and Ice Lance is very low. So to give you guys an example there, my Frostbolts are only hitting for like 20, 25k. The damage is not significantly high. You have to line it up with your Encanter's Flow a little bit as well too. Now, on top of that, when you actually get a Fingers of Frost proc as well, too, your Ice Lances are not hitting that hard as well, too. Your Ice Lances are very low damage. So, the problem is, they took away from this whole burst ramp up with Glacial Spike, and now the consistent damage with Frost is very low. So, it's kind of put Frost in this really weird spot between, like, okay, you guys set us on this route to go one-shot people, but then you took it away, and now our consistent damage is not there, and we have less CC than a Fire Mage to set up our sheeps because we don't have Deep Freeze anymore, which is also something, you don't have Deep Freeze anymore. Sorry. So that's not available either. So Frost is in a very weird spot right now. You can still do big damage with Glacial Spike and hit people for about 1 million, about half of their health pool. And it seems viable if you're going to play it with another control class like a Subtlety Rogue or possibly even another Frost Mage. Both of those combinations, because you have 2 people with the same power, you can't really lock down 2 people, 2 Frost Mages, so the twin pillars there. But other than that right now, it seems like Frost Mages are in this weird spot where they're going to need to see their consistent damage boost before I think that they're going to be effective. So for me right now, I personally have been enjoying Fire the most, but what you can get out of Frost is you can get a lot of Nova control, a little bit more slows, and you can have some fun still going in for the Glacial Spikes and hitting people for half their health. It just, to me personally, it's a lot of ramp up time to be able to do that, and I would like to see the damage be higher than that if it requires so much ramp up. So, to give you guys an example, just quickly here, I'll go and show you guys just what a generic ramp up would look like time-wise, just so you can get an idea in your head. So these are my Icicle procs right here on the side, just to give you an idea. And when you get 5 Icicle stores, you're going to want to use your Glacial Spike. So, when you use your Glacial Spike, you're going to want to Nova the target so that you can get bigger Icicles built up. So I can go in here and Nova him, go in for another Shatter on him, big Shatter combo, do another Nova, go in for another Shadow, and this way my Icicles are actually generating more than they should be. So I can hit this target over here as well too. So I have my Icicle stored up. Now I'm going to use my Glacial Spike. This is the second Glacial Spike, and it does pretty good damage. So like right now on live, this is a target dummy, so it's a little bit more damage than it should be. It's about half of someone's health pool, but it's a lot of ramp up just to be able to do that. So for me personally, that's probably something I will not find myself doing. But hopefully this overview will give you guys a better information on what is available to Mage right now and kind of the direction I could see Blizzard taking them, because I feel that they will buff Arcane Mages and Frost Mages just because their consistent damage is too low, and especially for Frost, since they have gone out of the route of making the one-shot, they've toned down the one-shot, which is, I think, was a good idea. No one wants to see someone die literally in one spell. That's horrible. But they need to make some adjustments to boost the consistent damage before it's something that's going to be playable and enjoyable for, I think, the majority of the player base. But hey, if you want to go for that one-shot still and play double Frost Mage, it's up to you, and the high mobility of Arcane Mage is there. I will just be Dragon's Breathing people real hard, going for them sheeps, and doing a lot of damage. So, guys, that's the Mage overview video. Hope you guys enjoy, and it gives you a good idea for what you can look forward to coming in Legion. Pick your spec wisely. I'm going fire. Have a good one, everyone.